Good evening, everybody. So I'm the newbie to the office. This is my first year at LFA. I started in August. But I live on campus here. I live in Warner. I also am the varsity assistant to the boys basketball team, and obviously advise some college students along the way as well. I came to LFA from Knox College, where I worked in their admission office for the past 3 years. So it's been good so far. I've been treated well. So thank you for that.
I am Andrew Pasca. I am the Dean of the office and have been so for 2 years now and have been at LFA for 12 years. This has become home to me from a guy from Lynn, Massachusetts, just outside Boston, and now this has been, I'm a true Midwesterner, I guess. But I've done a lot on campus and have always lived here. I coach prep hockey with Darren Madeley. I've coached tennis. One time referred to as the worst feeder on the North Shore, so I didn't coach it that well. And this year, my new venture is badminton. Luckily, it's varsity girls badminton, but there is a boy who's our manager who's had some experience in the sport, and he is pretty much the coach. I won't tell you what our record is, but we're having fun, and I really enjoy working with students, and I'm glad to be part of a team that takes the time to get to know the students and both the big ways and the small ways that characterize their high school experience, and at the end of the day, writes a thoughtful recommendation that characterizes their journey through high school. So thanks for coming out tonight.
Good evening, I'm Carolyn Borowski. I think I've worked with most of you guys in the admission process. I came to LFA 6 years ago. My first 3 years I was solely in the college counseling office, and then 3 years ago moved over to admissions, but I still work with a small group of students, typically between 10 and 15 per class, which I really enjoy and something I'm holding on to. I live on campus in Atlas Dorm. I'm also the JV field hockey coach this year. The past 5 years I've also coached track and field. And really just enjoy working with the students here and look forward to your questions tonight.
Hey everybody, my name is Abby Croft, and this is my 3rd year here at LFA. I am, let me count what I do. I'm also the head of Marshall Fieldhouse. I am assistant coach for cheerleading. I am also one of the sophomore class advisors, so you'll be hearing lots from me as prom comes up next year and all those questions that you have. And I'm also president of the LFA Kumbadi Society. So lots of different things I've had a chance to dabble in here at LFA. So we can definitely see that the students here have lots of opportunities to get involved, and I will talk about that in a little bit. Thanks.
All right, so the first thing that I thought I'd do relative to the group that we have is kind of just take you through how we'll work with your students in the next couple of years. We added this program about 3 or 4 years ago, and it wasn't in an effort to get you more anxious about the process. In fact, it was the opposite. We want to answer questions that you have early because we know that they're starting to come up, and that you want to be informed and that you want to get as good of understanding of the landscape as possible. So first things first, we have already senior students. We went to 9th grade seminar for a full cycle, and during that time we showed them their transcripts and talked a little bit about the cumulative effect and the fact that they were building a record here both academically and as citizens on campus. And we also talked about kind of goal setting and becoming how they were eventually going to undertake or take on, I should say, the mantle of leadership here at Lake Forest Academy, hopefully. And so we did that freshman year. Sophomore year was about taking stock. Is potential matching production in the classroom? Is there that intersection there? And then talking about the transcript or the story that their transcript tells, and every transcript tells a different story, and we want them to become more aware of how the record that they're building and the transcript, the grades that they're accumulating are telling a story of their time here academically. And also, are they getting involved in the life of the school in appropriate ways? And then next year, we'll start working with them obviously much more intensely they'll be assigned a college counselor in the fall. They won't start working with that person until January, but from January on, they'll meet with their college counselor once a cycle. So relative to other high schools, other public high schools, other private high schools, independent counselors in the area, we have a ratio that is pretty fantastic, and we take the time during those 45-minute periods to get to know the students, to talk to them about how high school has gone. The better we get to know them, the better recommendation we can write, and hopefully what we do is listen well, and we put a mirror up in front of them and ask them what they see and how things have gone. Because at the end of the day, the student that understands themselves the best is the student that's going to be the most compelling in the college process, because they're probably going to identify the colleges that are the best matches for them. And during their senior year, we get them ready to press submit. An often overwhelming kind of push for many students, but that's what we do, and so that's how our program, our 4-year program works. A couple events that you should be aware of are the college night that happens in September, and that program is one where we invite about 150 schools or so, and they have tables set up all around campus, and next year your students will be taking a more active role in the looking there. And we ask that both students and parents really come into the process with wide eyes and are really open to all the different possibilities that are out there. And another event that's really great is something that happens in January, the last Sunday in January, and it's on a Sunday, and we invite 13 college representatives from around the country to do a case study program with us. We often find that students and parents will listen probably a little bit more intently maybe if it's coming from people that are making decisions on a daily basis. So this past year we had representatives from Cornell, from Davidson College, from Purdue, from Wisconsin, really from all over the country. So we try to get big, small, we often try to have an engineering focused school, a school that may be strong in arts. This year we had Carnegie Mellon, a school that, an all-women's college, so that's something that's important to us and we will have 2 students next year, in fact, attending Barnard, so introducing students to that experience has tended to be a good thing. And then we encourage parents during that junior year to really have some one-on-one conversations with us via email. If you want to come in and have meetings, we're all 12-month employees, so we're happy to meet with you on your time. We understand that people work for a living, so if it needs to be at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night, that's fine for us. We all live on campus. If it needs to be at 7:30 before school, we're happy with that. But in doing this for a number of years now, I felt as though the more interaction that I've had with parents, the better. Because then we get on the same page, and then there's no, oh, Mr. Posca said this. How could he say that? And so to take away some of the triangulation, I think is a good thing. And my colleagues here are going to talk about some topics that are probably pertinent to where your students are at now and that you may have questions about. And then I'll talk later about some trends in college admissions from this year, and then we'll open it up to questions. You want to start?
I'm going to start talking about testing, which I know for a lot of families is an overwhelming topic, and there is a lot of information out there in terms of the ACT and the SAT and the subject tests and when to start testing and test prep. So just a quick introduction tonight, but please let us know with all the information that we're going to share tonight. Please let us know any follow-up questions you have this evening, or give us a call, shoot us an email. We're really happy to help answer your questions. There are both the ACT and SAT, which are the 2 main college entrance exams. Colleges will accept either one. They're not the more historically, it was East Coast schools and West Coast schools wanted SAT, and ACT was more of a Midwestern test. They're universally accepted. And so I think that's the first bit to know. I would say our students, we encourage them to take both tests and see which one is a better test for them. The ACT, our students have, when you look at the numbers and compare the scores, done a little bit better with the ACT than the SAT. However, the SAT is changing over, and the first there was a new SAT that was administered in March, and so your students will see the new SAT. By the time they're going through the process, we'll hopefully have more information about that new SAT. I think College Board looked through what the SAT test was testing and they tried to revamp that it was a better exam to get at what students were maybe covering in school, and it was maybe a fair test. The Kaplan test prep survey had actually surveyed a number of students after they took that March test, and the one quote that it was given high marks for having questions that were straightforward and easy to follow. I know that was, you know, some of the concern previously, as well as vocabulary that students maybe had never seen and probably would never see, and so students just memorizing vocabulary words, so that was a big change as well. The other feedback that they got was that 6-to-1 students preferred the new SAT versus the old SAT. The issue that we have right now in terms of comparing the two tests is that there's a delay in getting the scores back, where the March test scores aren't going to be available till mid-May. So once we get those scores back, we'll have a better idea of that exam and how our students did, and kind of moving forward, I think we'll have a better feel for it. So unfortunately, I would say tonight, you know, we have the information that's out there, but not a full understanding of that test. The other big change is that students aren't counted off for wrong answers, where previously students had to guess whether or not to answer the question. And I think for a lot of students at this age, there's enough test anxiety, and to then be able to determine, should I answer this test or leave it blank, or answer this question or leave it blank, that was another layer that I think some of the students struggled with. So I think that was a really nice change. The test overall is a little bit shorter and fewer sections. It's 4 sections, similar to the ACT with 4 sections. It used to be 10 shorter sections. So those are some of the changes with the new SAT. But the SAT and ACT are both administered about once a month. We encourage students to look to take their first ACT and SAT spring of their junior year. We'll have a number of students that will ask about taking it in the fall. And I think we encourage students to wait. There's enough to worry about junior year. There's not a real reason. There's enough tests that are offered. You'll cover a little bit more during your junior year. I think students are just better prepared for that if they wait. So typically students will take the first SAT March and first ACT in February of their junior year. There's also a January SAT test, so that's fine if students want to take that. And for the ACT, it's offered February, April, and June of junior year. So there are 3 options to take that. In the spring, the SAT is offered January, March, May, and June. So as you'll see, there's ample opportunities to take that. And what we'll recommend students is take both tests, see which one is a better test for you. They'll sit down with their college counselor, kind of compare their scores, see how they felt about the test, and then take the test that they felt better about a second time or a third time. A number of students will also, depending on how they feel with the test, then we'll look to work with the tutor. Please let us know if you have any questions. I know some local schools will publish a list. We have some tutors that students have worked with, or some local companies that we can recommend, and we're happy to do that. I would say, there are some tips and some suggestions in terms of timing and how to take that test that allows students to feel more comfortable, and we've seen some improvement in those scores after working with whether individual tutors or classes. We'll offer, and Shannon Braddock, who's our registrar, who's here tonight, she'll send out more information, but we'll offer a test prep course on campus through 1-to-1, which is a nonprofit company, for PSAT, SAT, and ACT. That'll be offered on Sundays, and let us know if you have any questions about that, but Shannon will be sending that out next year for you guys if you're interested in kind of the class format for that test, or for that test prep. Some schools will require students to send in every test that they've taken. It's called score, whether it's score choice, which means that you can choose which scores you're sending in. Some schools are not that. It's the most selective schools, the Ivies and some of the most selective schools want to see every test that you've taken. And that's where we'll caution students not to take it too early, and to talk to us if you think that your student is in that range. really strong grades in a number of APs, that they may be looking at those most selective schools, because you don't want them to take it too soon to have a really low score, because they will need to send that into the college. So it's good just to be aware of that. And when you're looking at schools, you can see that. There are a number of schools that are also test optional. And we like students to know that. A number of students have test anxiety and really struggle with test taking, and it's not a very good indicator, and it's not representative of their overall academic ability and potential, and maybe their grades are much stronger than their test scores. We don't want students to think that their test score is the end all be all, and if they cannot take get a strong ACT score or SAT score, that they won't get into a good school. A number of really great schools are test optional. It tends to be more liberal arts schools, but this year George Washington University went to test optional, which was kind of the first medium-sized research school to go in that direction. So it'll be interesting to see over the next couple years if more schools go in that direction. I think it's a great change. Colleges will reflect on data, and kind of that data is showing that the best indicator of a student's success in college is actually their high school GPA over a test score, but it tends to still be a relevant and important part of the admission process for a number of schools and a number of selective schools. So it's there, but it's also really important for everyone to know that there is the test optional part and a number of schools that are test optional. The other tests that students will want to start looking at are the subject tests. So SAT-2 subject tests are a number of different subjects that you can actually take a test, and it's showing your strength in that specific subject. It is not all schools will require it. It's recommended or strongly encouraged or strongly recommended, say at the most selective schools, or required at the most selective schools. So that is something to look at. Typically students in their junior year, if they are taking an AP class, for the May or June SAT will look to also take that subject test, because they've been working and reviewing through that subject. It will be similar. They will need to kind of study on their own for that subject test, but during the junior year, during our college counseling meetings, we'll talk through that with the student. If your son or daughter is kind of at the pre-calc level or above right now, it may be good, and we can kind of talk with them whether or not for Math 2 to take that. That would be kind of the one subject test to start looking at. Some students will look at the World 2 test. It's a pretty tough test, and we've seen sophomores, top sophomore students take it at the end of sophomore year because they're in the AP course and maybe not be as successful in that subject test as they would like. So we do caution sophomores when they're taking that, make sure make sure you're pretty serious as you're going to take that test, because if you're going to get a lower score in that world history subject test, it may be better for you to wait until, review through that, maybe take it junior year or look at another test that you may be ready for it. Sophomore year, sometimes students just aren't ready to take a subject test. So some of the most selective schools will recommend or require the subject test, as well as specific majors. A lot of times engineering, if you're looking to go into an engineering program or a science program, they'll recommend or require you to take at least a math and a science subject test. So kind of program specific as well as university specific for those. If I missed anything else. I think that's kind of a just quick overview for the testing. Also just wanted to touch base on the academic schedule and transcript. College counseling, I believe it was Ben and Andrew over spring break with Chris Tennyson in the Dean of Students Office, Shannon as well, reviewed through all of the course plans before they went out to advisors. So all of your sons and daughters kind of schedule and four-year course plan was reviewed by college counseling and Dean of Students before went to advisors. There are some changes that are going to happen in those meetings, with students and advisors and through parents communicating back with the advisor, and advisors are then going to communicate those changes with college counseling before anything is finalized. So we just want you guys to know that college counseling is looking through those, even though your son or daughter may not have a specific college counselor yet. We are looking through and making sure students are challenging themselves appropriately, as well as having balance in their schedule. Junior year is a big year for students, and it's, I think some students have started during sophomore year to take a couple APs and increase the rigor in their schedule. There's just many more opportunities for that junior year, and I know for a lot of students there's that pressure to take all of these APs, and all my friends are doing that. And it's a time for us to really sit down with students to reflect on what's going to be best for you. We want students to continue to do well, and their GPA is going to be really important. And for some students, they're ready to take 4 APs. Some students aren't at that same place, and that's okay. And so we've been having those conversations with students, and a number of sophomores have already stopped by our offices, or advisors have touched base with us as well. So your sons and daughters may have already popped by our office just to touch base with us about schedules. But if you have any questions, let us know. Advisors have already kind of communicated the parent questions as well. But it's all about kind of the balance, wanting to challenge students, but really the balance is going to be a big piece there, and also making sure that their schedule is reflective of their interests and passions. And for some students who maybe are clearly demonstrating an interest in science, they may be starting to look at doubling up in the science, or starting to take an elective, or looking at that. So there's just a little more flexibility in that junior year schedule, so we know this is kind of the time that more questions will come up in that regard. That's it.
Sure. Okay. So one of the wonderful things that I think we all in the room would probably agree with is that LFA offers our students a wide, a very grand scale opportunity of things to get involved in. One of the things that we continually ask students is, who are you in this community? Who are you in the world? What are you doing to make a difference? What are you doing to show who you are? And I think that everyone at this table would welcome you to continue those conversations at home, because now's the time to make sure that their interests reflect their future passions, the things that they're thinking about going into. There are a wide variety of clubs. There are a wide variety of leadership opportunities. We all are participating in sports. The arts program here is fantastic because there's so many different things a student can do. Even if they're not interested in art as a profession, they could take glass blowing as one of their things that they want to do. Working with making some amazing ceramics. There are just so many different things that students can do here. And we encourage you to talk to them about, making sure that their interests mirror their future interests. So if a student is interested in engineering, for example, we would hope that here they're starting to get involved in the robotics club, that they're doing science olympiad if chemistry might be a passion of theirs, and starting to get involved in those things now. If they are interested in the arts or theater, exhausting all those opportunities here and maybe even looking into the community for other options there. Leadership is something that I think everyone talks about, and sometimes there's a question of, well, doesn't my son or daughter have to be class president or be leader of this amazing club that travels all over the world and raises all kinds of money to be able to get into that top elite school? And that's not always the case. It could be a club that they started. It could be being part of managing a sports team for multiple years. There's all kinds of places for a student to get involved in based on their personality. Maybe they're not somebody who likes to get up in front of everyone and have a big speech. That's okay. You can find a different way for them to get involved. Service is another thing that we do a lot here. And talk to your student about what they like to do. Maybe they're interested in working with animals. Maybe that's something they really enjoy, or children, or the elderly. There's so many different things that they could do here at LFA and also in your own community at home. So talking about the quality of the experience, not necessarily the quantity, but the quality, and making sure that once again, that interest mirrors what they're looking for in the future. sometimes we have parents ask us, well, how many things do we need to have? Or a student will be like, I need to make sure that I fill up every single line on the Common Application. And again, it's quality, not quantity. There's a lot of research out there today about the amount of things a student does, and then once they get to that interview, they can't actually vocalize what they're interested in. Or a college is going to pick up that one minor thing. I saw you did this that summer, or you were involved in working at this organization while you were in school. How was that? And it's hard as a teenager to vocalize everything that you're interested in. We get it. Put a bug in your advisor's ear. Have them come talk to us. We know as parents, your parents of teenagers, we get it. They might not be listening to you all the time. Hopefully they're listening to you some of the time. But it's okay if you need help. Some of the different things that we've seen students do when it comes to their interests. We have a student who was very interested in our prison system. She developed an independent study. She went on a ride-along, right? I mean, she did some pretty cool things because she was interested in that.
She writes for the newspaper downtown,
Yeah.
like homeless Chicago, citywide, streetwise. Yeah, she's on the Wilmette Student Judiciary Board. I mean, she's pursued that with a passion.
So she clearly is doing things that mirror what she's interested in the future. I had a student this summer who we started out having her as my lighting designer for a community theater production, and she ended up being my assistant producer and took on a wide variety of roles with that. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. We all are involved in different things. We all have different interests and try to stay involved in knowing what's going on in the community surrounding and down into Chicago. So if you have questions about other things that your student can do here or outside, we would love to help you out with that as well. But now's the time to sort of start thinking about having those conversations with your students so that you can make sure that you're not waiting until the end of next year to have that, because the college is going to see, oh, you just started doing these things as of senior year. You want to be able to have that conversation with the admissions officer as to, yeah, I've been doing these things and I really enjoy it. This is something I might want to do in the future. Or just something they want to continue doing in college, because that matters too, even if it's not their future profession. One of the other things that we talk about with students is what their plans are for the summer, and so I will pass it on over to Ben.
I will just add one quick thing. One of the things that I always tell our students is that the more constructed the student looks in the college application process, the less compelling their application will be. And so, these programs, and I'm sure you're getting inundated with emails to go to different college campuses and do different things, but again, make sure that it comes, if they do a college program, that it comes from an authentic place and not trying to construct themselves for the college application moment. And Abby referred to the student that started the independent study, and I talked to a couple people that interviewed her, a couple college admissions people that interviewed her after she had interviewed, and they said that the best part of her interview is when she talked about social justice. So if there's a passion, it comes through, and people get that.
Thanks, Andrew. So before I talk about summer programs, I think it's also important to realize, especially, that your sons and daughters don't have to know what they want to do with the rest of their life in order to engage in this college search process. You've heard a lot of different checkpoints and the different, probably making like mental lists and notes that you're thinking about things we have to do over the course of the next 2.5 years in order to be a competitive applicant at a lot of schools. And I think it's important to realize and to also not put pressure on the students to come up with an answer, because it's okay to not know. And I guess I have a question for you all that might hopefully drive home that point. So I want you to raise your hand if and only if at the tender age of 15, 16, you knew exactly what you wanted to do, and you've done that and only that up to this point in your life. One, awesome, that's great. And I think there's another important point to make is that the whole college search process has changed immensely since we went through it, since you all have gone through it. So again, raise your hand if you participated in a summer program while you were a high school student. Couple? Yeah. So I think they've definitely grown quite a bit since then. What do you all think is the biggest reason why colleges do summer programs? Absolutely. They are one of the biggest auxiliary revenue sources for colleges. And I share that with you, not to belittle or to take a jab at summer programs. So I think there is a lot of value in them if you pick them correctly, and they are authentic representations of what your son or daughter's interests are. But I say that because I think there's a lot of misperceptions in this process. And one of the biggest ones that surrounds summer programs is that, if I go and participate in Stanford's Global Youth Leadership program over the summer, that's going to give me a leg up in their admission process, which honestly couldn't be further from the truth. And I think that if your son or daughter is really interested in engaging and learning more about other cultures, other places, and sees herself or himself as a leader moving forward, then that's a great fit for that particular student. And it's not something that's going to fit somebody that wants to go into engineering per se. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that whatever it is that the student's pursuing, and whether that be a summer program or anything else outside the classroom, as Ms. Croft said earlier, it should be authentic to them, and it should represent their direct interests. I think a lot of the students that I advise, especially in this year early on in their junior year, they're talking about the things that they should get involved in. They look at it as like a direct, like, what do I need to do that's going to look good on my common application, my extracurricular activities and involvements. But what it really should be is, what am I authentically interested in? And let me pursue that and take on as much leadership, responsibility, initiative as I can. And as an indirect result, that's going to look really good on my application, I guess. But I guess more specific to summer programs, you want to pull up the website really quick, Abby? Obviously, LFA has a large percentage of students participate in them. On the website, if it comes up eventually, you'll see there's a link to a bunch of different programs, from art, design, students, programs for creative writing, science, math, a whole wealth that LFA students have attended in the past. They vary in cost depending on where they are, the length of time, things like that. Some go for a week, some go for 6 to 8 weeks. And I've seen, honestly, ones that have been $1,000, ones that have been $10,000. But I think the important thing to take away from them is if they do directly interest your son or daughter, then they're worth pursuing. But don't view them as a way to get a leg up or in the admission process. And I would definitely encourage you all to navigate not only this part of the website, the summer program, but the college counseling part as well. I think there's a lot of good information and resources on there. And I guess before I turn it over to Andrew, the other thing that I'll add is really just what I was mentioning earlier. Finding those things and engaging in them. And it doesn't have to be 6 or 7 or 8 different things. You don't have to be this amazingly well-rounded student. I know that's something that a lot of you get concerned with. I think finding that one thing that you can participate in all 4 years or all 3 years and see it through is something that I think colleges really value. So I guess I'll leave you with that. Sound good?
Yeah. And now I'll just briefly touch upon kind of the year in review and some trends that we're seeing in the college admissions world. Number one is just students are applying to way more schools these days, and application numbers are shooting up, and up. I was just at Vanderbilt last week for a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday counselor fly-in program, And just to give you some context, Vanderbilt this year will have received over 30,000 applications. And that's about a 20,000 increase in the last 10 years. So, and so the Vanderbilt that parents know, where students were probably admitted maybe at a 40% rate or a 50% rate, their admit rate this year is 11%. So the medium-sized research universities, close to cities, seem to be capturing the attention of a lot of college-bound students, and I would say in particular at those schools are really seeing a rise in applicant pools, especially because they can probably or do probably attract international students a little bit better than some other schools. UCLA will see over 100,000 applications this year. Yes, 100,000. And so those schools, as much as they say that they're holistic, and that term is going to be thrown out there a ton, to be honest with you, and I'm not trying to be a cynic here, but they're not very holistic. The California system, for instance, they have a California app, and if you received an A- in the class, you type in A-, and it immediately it populates as an A. If you type in A+, it populates as an A. So there's no distinguishing A+ or A-. So a student that has 12 A- could still be viewed as a 4.0 student in their system. Another thing is in the California system, they're taking a few more, they are getting more and more out-of-state and international students applying. They're taking a few more, just because the California system needs a whole bunch of revenue. And so the California chancellor came out last week, and after a backlash of why are we taking more out-of-state and international students, and she said flat out they're keeping the lights on. So that's one thing that we're seeing. Another thing and I'll read this, and this was particularly kind of fascinating this year, and this is a change from when I first started. My background is that I've been here 12 years as a college counselor, and then prior to that I worked at the University of Michigan for 3 years as an admissions counselor, and prior to that I was the assistant hockey coach at Bowdoin in Maine and kind of headed up recruiting. So that's my background, and so I've seen a lot of different things, and I would say that this next thing is something that's been a change more recently. This is a letter that I got today, in fact, from a fairly selective liberal arts school in New England. And they're trying to identify one of the reasons that they're becoming more selective. And they say, another factor is that need awareness did play a role for our regular decision applicants. Competition for higher need students continues to increase. Considering the limited financial resources at our disposal and our commitment to meet the full demonstrated need of every student we admit, it's becoming more and more difficult on our end to select a few who we believe will find our place to be a great fit. I want to stress 2 points. First, I honestly wish we could admit more high-need students. And second, we spent a great deal of time considering and yes, agonizing over these decisions. There are many deserving candidates in our pool this year, as there are every year, and we've done our best to shape our class within the limits allowed by our budget, whose members will love their experience at our school. So, needy students, especially during the regular round, it was particularly difficult this year. And so as we work with students that may have medium to high need, I think it's important that we cast a wide net in terms of selectivity. This school that I'm referencing, 5, 8 years ago would be a school that I would say, a 3.7 student with a 29 on their ACT, that would be a place that would fund them. Not so anymore. You probably need closer to a 3.8, 32 in order to be a student that's compelling for financial resources. And so that's one thing I did want to touch upon briefly is those that are going to be filling out or going to be applying for aid in the process. I would advise you to get to a college financial aid calculator, and that's federally mandated that all schools on their websites need to have an aid calculator, and pump in your information, and pump it in correctly, and give them as much as you can, and get a read. Just to let you know, if you're a family whose income is between the process is 2/3 income driven, but if you're a family that falls within that 170 to 230 total income, that's a difficult spot in terms of if you have a student that's your first child going to college, because that puts you in a position where that school is probably going to ask an awful lot. And so in that case, if that doesn't seem like a number that works for your family, you're probably going to have to cast a wider net in terms of looking at places that may offer merit-based money too. And you probably, for those students applying for aid, you probably want to apply to an in-state institution that may be a little less expensive. And still apply to all those other places, but have a balanced list and make sure that you let counselors know that aid is a part of the process. And that's why getting that information out there to us really helps us advise your students as well, better in the long run. The other thing that I did want to mention is that, to start the year off, and we have November 1, November 15th early decision deadlines, schools are taking in more and more and more of their overall classes in the early decision round. So when I first started, like 30% or 25% was kind of an ugly number. They didn't want to talk about getting to 25% of their class early decision. It was just no, we don't do that. We want to, and now they've gone from 25 to most schools in a very selective range are admitting 50%. For instance, Vanderbilt this year admitted 50% of their class early. All of the NESCAC schools, pretty much close to 50% of their class during the early decision round. So they're securing Northwestern 50% of the class. And I used this example with students. Northwestern, because this is part of the college counseling psychology, I think. So you have a student that's a really good candidate at Northwestern. And so they may be like a 3.9 with 6 or 7 APs or so, and maybe a 33 on their, or a 32, 33 on their ACT. Great profile. They're deciding between Northwestern and a few other places. Northwestern's admit rate in the early decision round is about 23% or so. Guess what it is regular? 8%. So, if you decide as a family, you know what, and a lot of families make this mistake, they say, Northwestern's a great school, but geez, I think that, you could do better. You could get maybe Penn, maybe Yale early. And by applying to those places early, you could lose out on that other place regular. For instance, this year during the regular round at Northwestern, we went 2 for 12. Or 2 for 14. We had some 4.1, 34, 35 students dinged regular, which is amazing. But I think Northwestern, and I talked to I think Northwestern probably said to us, it was a response saying, you're right down the road, if your students really loved us, they would know us and they probably would apply early, and we're not going to be their fallback. And to a certain extent, I can't, I think that there's some validity to there, because a lot of the students that were applying did apply early decision to other places and were looking for another option later, so there was some truth to that, but at the same time, regular decision is hard. I'll open it up to questions now, because I've talked a lot. Yep.
On that last depressing note, recovering from the numbers and yield, I don't know if these terms still apply anymore, but you mentioned that students are applying to an overall larger number of schools. In my era, to date myself, was maybe 3, 5, 7. I'm guessing that's gone up. Is there still a ratio of what we used to call kind of safety and reach schools? So my question is, what's the total number, and how are those kind of divided up, or would you recommend?
I would say 8 to 12 is right around the wheelhouse. It could be a couple more based on if you're casting a wider net for financial aid. It could be a couple less if you have a couple safer places that you get maybe early in the process that you're really comfortable with. But usually right around 8 to 12, and probably it will be an average of right around 10 this year. And I would say, 3 places that are a little bit stretchy. I always say stretching with your feet on the ground. You know, so some students will say, yeah, it's a stretch, and you know, they're a 3.5 and a 28, and their stretches are Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, and you know, if they don't know anybody or can't build a building or can't run a ball 30 times on a Saturday, it's not going to happen. So stretching with your feet on the ground, and then 3 places that are probably like wheelhouse on your in profile, and you know, not. Probably 6 times out of 10, that school is going to admit you, and then 3 schools that you're feeling that you're probably a little bit ahead of profile, and that you're going to be a student that's probably viewed in the top 25% of the applicant pool.
Also with that, when students are looking at early decision schools, we'll ask them to apply to a couple EA schools as well. We like students kind of early in the process to at least, and hopefully one of those EA schools is a mid-range or likely school, so come December, if it doesn't shake out with the ED school, they have somewhere they can feel good about, because it is pretty disappointing when they don't get into the ED school, or if they go and don't get in anywhere early and their friends have all gotten some good news. So we'll look at that list and make sure they have some early options. I guess just briefly talk about the deadlines. There are early decision schools, which is binding. You have to go to that school if you're admitted, but you can apply to other kind of priority or early action deadlines that are not binding. There are a select number of schools that have restrictive early action, and that means you can only apply to that school, potentially your in-state public school or other public schools. Schools will differ on what that term means to them, but it's not a binding decision. Some of the most selective places have moved towards the restrictive early action instead of early decision because of financial need and not wanting students to have all of the information before they're making that commitment, and financial aid is part of the process. So some of your Ivy, Stanford, Boston College, there's a number of schools that have moved towards that restrictive early action instead. And then regular decision, and their early action, early decision, restrictive early action are all November 1, November 15th, December deadlines, all before the new year. And then regular decision schools are going to be January and February. To complicate matters even more, there are a limited number of schools that will offer an early decision 2 option. And those schools, their deadline will be January 15th or January 1st, similar to the regular decision deadline, but you still are demonstrating that extra interest and you're saying you will go there if admitted. To kind of go back to a few things that Andrew said, the issue though with the ED2 versus the ED1 is they will see the entire applicant pool at that time because everyone else is applying regular decision on that same deadline. So you get that extra benefit of demonstrating interest, but at that point they'll see the entire pool, where the extra bonus with early decision 1 is they haven't received those extra thousands of applications that they'll get regular. So just to kind of quickly cover on the different application deadlines too.
Also, when it comes to picking out that list, looking at the schools that are the reach and the target, or the match schools or safety schools, something else to consider is maybe the program that the student is applying to, because it's very possible that a student could look like a good applicant for NYU, but maybe not be applicable for Stern. Engineering, this year Carnegie Mellon came to us and said pretty much you need to be virtually perfect in every category to be able to even be considered for computer science. Whereas maybe it would be a little bit easier as a mechanical engineering major or something of the sort. U of I, Purdue, a few other places had mentioned to us if they don't list a second choice for their major, and they didn't get into the first major, they're automatically deferred or waitlisted. So there are a few things like that to consider, especially when it comes to the major, casting a wide net when you're looking at art schools as well. So there's a few other things that you will want to consider when it comes to making that list with the majors.
Questions?
Questions?
I just have a follow-up question for when our children start taking the tests next spring, as you suggested. I was talking to a couple junior moms, and they were saying that some of the sites get filled up real fast, For this testing that's being offered here at LFA, do our students get first choice?
No, they
They just have to
don't.
be on the deadline.
Yeah, we encourage them to sign up as soon as possible if they want to use LFA as their site. Deerfield, Highland Park, Stevenson, there's a lot of nearby locations, but they do not get first choice for LFA.
And then you'll let them know when they should be signing up
Yes.
or to take it here.
Yes, and there's, the deadlines for next year are already published. There's a regular registration deadline, there's also a late registration deadline, which would cost extra money. But we would encourage them to sign up as soon as they know what works best with your family calendar. And that's probably something to talk about when it comes to breaks. If something falls on spring break the weekend before or too quickly after APs, there's a lot of things to take into consideration when you're choosing what test to go for.
Questions back there, yes?
Okay, so going back to our kids not knowing what they want to be, how bad does it look to put in an application undecided? Or how good?
You can take it.
You know, it can be difficult in certain situations, and it can be easy in others. So, for instance, I had a student this year who really wanted to go to NYU, but wanted to go there for business. And as we kind of alluded to already, depending on what programs you're applying to at that school, it might change on what profile you need. So this particular student had to decide on another business school that they got into, or they could go to NYU undecided and potentially transfer into their major of business, which is very, very competitive. And it would require, I think, each student to ask that particular admission officer at that school, how difficult is it for me to get into engineering or business at your school once I'm there as an enrolled student? So I don't think it's bad on applying undecided. In fact, at a lot of places, it's much easier to get in if you're applying to a liberal arts and science or undeclared major. But then you need to follow up and ask yourself, well, what are the likely scenarios that could potentially happen, and how difficult will it be for me to get to that eventual goal that I have at that school? So, does that hopefully answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
And I asked this question last week, and I continue to ask it, and I'll keep parents posted on what I'm hearing. But I have to think that in the next 2, 3, 5 years, that some medium-sized research places that have a liberal arts program are going to start to be a little bit more discerning with students applying based on a major, just because there's so many STEM-focused students these days that I think that the faculties in other departments are going to start to demand admissions take a good hard look at the student that wants classics and that wants different things. So I think that that's going to be a change. Schools won't admit that change right now. They say, you know, students, we love undecided and students change majors all the time, but I have to think with STEM focus these days that will be kind of I have to predict that will be a coming change. Question? Any questions? Just some reminders to parents. I also have visits. It's a good time to start thinking about visiting places. If you're visiting places this summer, I would highly encourage that you steer clear of small liberal arts schools that are a little bit more secluded, because those places tend to feel very, very different in the summertime than they do in the fall. So that's one warning. But once you get the academic calendar for next year, I would make sure that you plan some dates to see some places and see a good range of places. And make sure that you recognize the choices that you're making in visiting schools and how they may impact your child's take on the college process. If in the first visits you see, if you go to Boston, see MIT, Harvard, and Tufts, you're seeing 3 places that are admitting at less than 15%. And that message is clear to your children and saying, these are the schools that my parents think are good enough. And I think I would say, cautionary tale on that, visit a range of schools, a range of selectivity, a range of experience. Visit Boston University, which admits at like a 40% rate or 35% rate, but it's a really urban school. If your idea of a cool campus is concrete and watching the green, watching the buzz of people go by and having the opportunity to go to 150 great restaurants and within a 10-minute walk, then BU is a great place. But some students want a hub, they want a campus quad, they want different things. So visit places based on student experience versus, oh, these are the 3 stretchiest schools on your list, so we need to get there first. I'd be caught. I would definitely be watch out for that. The other thing is to watch the language that you use, or that you try to stifle maybe family language surrounding the college process. I had a junior in my office today, and she's like, if I have another aunt or uncle or grandparent ask me like where I'm looking, I'm really going to get heated, because it's, people hear that you're a junior in high school and naturally they say, where are you looking at college? And my best advice to students is to say, I'm looking at a wide range of places. I'm working with my college counselor. I really don't know. I'm excited about what the future holds in store. And that way you keep people off. Because, and I tell the students this too, if you put on your Facebook page, can't wait to hear what Penn says on December 15th. If Penn says no, you're going to feel like the whole world knows, and that's not a good feeling. So make sure that the process is a personal one. So keep it. I tell parents and students, and parents, this is good advice for you too, because you're meeting people all around. You have a junior in high school. Where are they applying? Well, they went ED there, and all of a sudden December comes around, and you have to let them know that ED didn't work out, and then it's kind of awkward for everyone involved. So. I think that's a lot of what we had to say. Ask questions, set one-on-one meetings with us. I didn't mean to scare people tonight, that's for sure. And I had this story up, and I got it about a month ago from a student that went to Scripps College, and Scripps College is an all-women's school, they're part of the Claremont Consortium. And I'll just read her email. And I think one of the lesser known or stories that needs to be publicized about Lake Forest Academy a little more these days is these success stories coming from LFA graduates in the last 10 to 12 years. Amazing stories. Students are doing unbelievably well. And this is one of those students. She wrote to me, hey Mr. Pasca, everything is going really well. Working hard on my thesis at the moment, so that's a bit of a doozy. But I enjoyed a full year abroad in Freiburg, Germany as a junior, so a little hard work is probably deserved. I'm studying politics and international relations with a focus on food policy as well as a minor in German studies. As far as the future go, I've applied for quite a few things. I am most interested in the Watson Fellowship, which offers seniors at selective colleges the chance to travel and pursue a research project for a full year. That's a big deal scholarship. I have attached my proposal and personal statement to this email just so you can see what it is all about. In the event that I don't receive the fellowship, I have plans with my contacts in Belgium and Austria to intern both in their Garden Education Center in Austria as well as lobby seed policy in Belgium alongside their EU policy officer. I have also applied for a Fulbright English teaching assistantship in Germany. I love my time abroad, so I intend to return to Germany for my master's. And so she just updated me. She didn't get the Watson, but she did get the Fulbright. So, those success stories are out there. We had another boy last year who graduated from Wofford. A lot of people don't know where Wofford is. It's in South Carolina. He graduated magna cum laude with a degree in math, and he is now pursuing his PhD in computational studies at William & Mary. So, like I said, the success stories, we had another boy who graduated from Macalester last year, got a Fulbright for economics. So the success stories from places that you may have heard about and may not have heard about are amazing, and so think about those success stories when people tell you that your son or daughter needs to go to a certain place, because you don't get the keys to any kingdom when you're admitted to college, and I think that you need to remind your students and yourselves that as they look forward and hopefully are optimistic about their futures. So thanks for coming out tonight, and wish you all the best.